And a lot of the areas that they stood out are what I would call the basics or the fundamentals. Things like getting back in transition defensively and not allowing a lot of fast break points. Things like rebounding the ball, especially on the defensive end. Their first couple games, they were not very good on the defensive glass. And then they cleaned that up within like a week of the season starting, and they've been very good since then. And things like that. They're not amazing at all of the fundamentals. They still turn the ball over a fair amount, as you would expect from a young team. But I thought it was notable that in a lot of these areas that I would call basics or fundamentals of the game, they have been good, because that's not something you necessarily see from young teams right away, and especially a team that is this young. So yeah, I think, part of that, Sidney Johnson has talked a ton about how coachable this team is. He says they just listen when he says stuff.
Talk about the Mystics. They're having a bit of a resurgence at this point as the recording of this podcast. They're flirting with about 500. They're currently sitting around 8th place. Can you just talk about their resurgence this season? I think for casual fans of the W, this is quite the surprise. What do you attribute their success for the season to?
Yeah, I think it's a surprise kind of for a lot of folks. I mean, the players in the locker room probably wouldn't say it's a surprise, but I think it is fair to say that they are ahead of schedule with where most people projected their rebuild to be. I think they've shown so far this season that they've got a really solid foundation for the future, not just with the picks that they made in the 2025 draft, but other young players that they have on the roster. Shakira Austin, Aaliyah Edwards, Jade Melbourne, the list goes on. But they've really got a strong group of players, 25 and under, and if they can kind of keep the group together and keep focusing on player development like they are, they've really got a group that could do a lot of damage in coming seasons and maybe even make a playoff push here.
Yeah, talk about them reforming their roster around younger talent, and really their philosophy and rebuilding a winning culture in Washington.
Yeah, so there was a change at the top last offseason. Mike Tebow and Eric Tebow exited as general manager and head coach, respectively, and in came Jamila Weidman as the general manager and Sidney Johnson as the head coach. And they generally stood pat in free agency, aside from trading Ariel Atkins for the number 3 pick in the draft, which was a big trade and kind of continued to push the rebuild forward by kind of doubling down on the idea of, getting young talent that's on rookie contracts under team control for a while. And so they had 3 of the top 6 picks in the 2025 draft. Leading up to the draft, there was some question, did they trade some or all of those picks in some sort of bigger package? They decided to use all of those picks. They seem to have hit on all of them. The number 6 overall pick, Georgia Amore, hasn't played this season because she tore her ACL in training camp. But seems like she will be, a great addition when she'll be able to rejoin the team next season. And then Sonia Citron and Kiki Iriafen, the numbers 3 and 4 picks, respectively, have been outstanding, kind of mirroring the Mystics as a whole. Really, they're ahead of schedule. They got off to an amazing start and never really pulled back on that, and that's kind of buoyed the Mystics tremendously. Both of them are starters, so it's been a youth movement. They have 6 of the 20 youngest players in the entire league, which is kind of crazy. They're the youngest team by a mile, but they're really leaning into it and kind of embracing the growing pains that are going to come. They're not looking for perfection at this point. They're looking for getting better and learning every day.
With Sonia and Kiki, what are they experiencing this season by having success this early? Because stereotypical rookie goes through a lot of growing pains in regards to not only their development, but winning too. Usually they come from a winning culture previously from high school and college, and then usually there's a dip on a professional level until things usually turn around. Typically, sometimes that's not the case, but in this situation with Sonia and Kiki, it seems like all of a sudden they're in contention for a playoff spot, and they're going to be playing high-level basketball, playing into close to the fall when the playoffs start. So, just curious, have they been shocked by this success, just in terms of their development, or have they been full speed ahead and embracing just what's happened this season?
I think it's been more embracing. I don't think they've been surprised, even as, outsiders can be like, wow, the fact that they're doing what they're doing is incredible. The fact that the Mystics are doing what they're doing is really impressive. But I think, both rookies, they talk about each other like, they came into the league together, have kind of gone through all the same things at the same time. And so they're each other's kind of built-in buddy as they go through it, which I think has really helped both of them to be able to lean on each other, and they became fast friends at the draft, so that's been great. But yeah, they've both gone off to great starts. Iriafen was the WNBA Rookie of the Month in May, and Citron could have been the Rookie of the Month if not for Iriafen. And it's kind of amazing thinking back to kind of preseason expectations for them. I mean, they definitely did not expect to be named All Stars to do what they've done, and I think outsiders, even looking, in the preseason, it was like, well, where's Iriafen gonna play when you have Shakira Austin and Steph Dolson and Aaliyah Edwards and Emily Engsler? Like, how many minutes is she gonna get? I think that a realistic projection for her, after the draft was, a bench role where she gets, maybe 15 minutes a game, like that sort of thing. And instead, she started right away, in part because of injuries to Shakira Austin and Aaliyah Edwards, and just has had a stranglehold on that spot. There's been absolutely no reason to move her off it, even with Austin and Edwards back in the fold. And so it's kind of a meteoric rise that I think sometimes gets forgotten now because she's been in that spot so steady all season. It kind of looks like it should have been the plan, but it really wasn't the plan just because there was so much front court depth, and Iriafen kind of muscled her way in and kind of insisted on it when the opportunity struck. So that's really impressive as a rookie to see that being so solid. And then Citron, she was projected as a starter. She's the only true wing on the roster, so everybody knew she was going to play. But I think the question with her was, how many shots is she going to get? I mean, Brittney Sykes, we knew was going to be the high usage guard, and it was like, is she going to be more of a role player? Is she going to take a lot of shots? Unclear, and she's definitely swung more toward the taking a lot of shots being a really reliable go-to option for them. So I think she has also kind of exceeded what the reasonable expectations were for her right away.
Can you talk about head coach Sidney Johnson's approach to this team and how he plays into their success and what his philosophy is with the Mystics in terms of having all these players gel together?
Yeah, it's been almost like a college environment, which I don't say in a negative way. I think part of it is just what happens when you have six players who are 22 or younger, right? Like they're about college age, and there's a little bit of that. But I also think it's, kind of how he cares for them as people. Not to say that like most pro coaches don't, but in college there's kind of that tight knit like developmental emphasis, and that's what he's brought. He's very focused on the players as people. He's very focused on their development and growth and finding joy in every practice. We're kind of in the dog days of summer now, where for some teams it can turn into a little bit of a grind, and he wants to make sure that it's never a grind for this team, whatever the record is. That they're always enjoying coming to practice each day and giving their best. The players have joked that he kind of gives off like a dad vibe, which makes sense because he literally is a dad. But he like cares about them a lot. He talks about them a lot as a sisterhood. So it's just a very like wholesome, tight knit group, and he's realistic. He knows that this was kind of supposed to be a rebuilding year. I think he's very proud of where they are now, but like he knows that wins and losses aren't the end all be all. It's more about the process right now.
On that point, what is your opinion of coaching? Because I think from a fan point of view, it's usually like one way or the highway. Either, a lot of fans think, hey, we need a hard-nosed coach that's strict and that's all about winning. Or that might create a toxic environment. You need somebody that's more in the fact. Do you think there's different approaches to coaching? This based on how the team's made up. It's about the personality, not necessarily just one coaching philosophy that's going to be the dominant, successful choice. Do you think there's variety of nuance when it comes to how coaching is in the professional race, you think?
Absolutely. I think every coach has their own style, and I also think it's like kind of a week to week thing, right? Like you have to know what buttons to push. Some weeks you might need to be a little harder on folks, like kind of, like get some juice in them a little bit, fire them up. Other weeks, they might all be exhausted, and they might just need you to be a little more empathetic, maybe pump the brakes on, pushing them, to their limits so they can recover a little bit. So I think it really varies. For me, what I look for to indicate like coaching success is just signs of buy-in from the team. And I think they had that last year with Eric Tebow, and I think they've had it this year with Sidney Johnson, and those are different styles, and that's great. And I think it's just a matter of what style works for the group that you have, and what do they respond to. And then I also think it's important, like you always need your veterans to be coaches on the floor, right? So it's not just what the head coach is doing or even what the staff is doing. It's how that's working in concert with the leaders that you have on the team to really keep emphasizing the same messages and pushing the group in the right direction.
You recently wrote an article about how the Mystics, are very good at the basics of the game. Can you elaborate on that? Because I feel like that's usually lost when it comes to the viewer just, watching for the games in the W very casual. Like, I feel like the basics and fundamentals are usually overshadowed over just kind of other narratives that might happen over the course of the game. But yet, I think the Mystics are really capitalizing and focusing on fundamentals, and it's proved to be successful so far.
Yeah, I was doing a big stats dive on how they've been so successful in the first half of the season, how they've kind of exceeded these expectations that we've talked about. And a lot of the areas that they stood out are what I would call the basics or the fundamentals, things like getting back in transition defensively and not allowing a lot of fast break points. Things like rebounding the ball, especially on the defensive end. They've been, their first couple games, they were not very good on the defensive glass. And then they cleaned that up within like a week of the season starting, and they've been very good since then. Things like that. They're not amazing at all of the fundamentals. They still turn the ball over a fair amount, as you would expect from a young team. But I thought it was notable that in a lot of these areas that I would call basics or fundamentals of the game, they have been good, because that's not something you necessarily see from young teams right away, and especially a team that is this young. So yeah, I think, part of that, Sidney Johnson has talked a ton about how coachable this team is. He says they just listen when he says stuff, and he is he's admitted, he'll repeat stuff like ad nauseum, like if he needs to. He'll be like, we need to run these guys off the 3-point line, which has been a bit of a point of emphasis lately. And he'll say it again, and he'll say it again, and they'll listen and they'll do it, but just the repetition, helps it sink in. So I think it's kind of a symbiotic thing there. And then just player development, they're focusing on player development, and a lot of times that includes, the fundamentals of the game, improving in those areas, as well as, adding complex things. Like a lot of it is what we would call like basic things, but they're little things and they're important things.
Can you talk about the development of Aaliyah Edwards, just what you've seen in terms of her growth, and what expectations do you have for the rest of the season and beyond, and just kind of how she's feeling this season, we think?
Yeah, I think the injury that she had to start the season, she had a back contusion and missed several games, and I think that kind of set her back, not in terms of like skill or anything like that, but just in terms of the crowded post rotation that I was talking about earlier with respect to Kiki Iriafen. In an alternate world where Aaliyah Edwards is healthy to start the season, she might have been the starter with Shakira Austin out. And then this season would probably look very different in terms of her minutes. Like she maybe could have had the Kiki Iriafen path where she settles in early and kind of keeps that spot. That's one way this could have gone. But she was injured, and by the time that she got back, Shakira Austin was always going to be in the mix. Kiki Iriafen had taken off. Sidney Johnson really values what Steph Dolson can do and the leadership that she brings. And so it was just really tough for Aaliyah Edwards to get minutes, and it has been tough for Aaliyah Edwards to get minutes. And so it's I think numerically you'd say, oh, I would have expected a little bit more from her this year, but it's just been tough for her to find the minutes to actually put those things together. And we see it in some games. She's scored in double figures a couple times. But Sidney Johnson is really not emphasizing the scoring to her. He is emphasizing her rebounding, especially her offensive rebounding. He is a big fan of her offensive rebounding and putbacks, and also her defense. And, just last game, she took a charge, and the whole bench was really fired up. She was fired up. It seems like she's bought into that role, and she's being patient as she continues to develop. So, I think she's bought in and is doing what she can. And it's just kind of a reminder that for most players, development isn't linear. You're not going to like get better at every stat every year until you retire. There's going to be like ups and downs and different ways that you have to play, different coaches that you play for. And it's kind of all part of the process. And I think she gets that.
Can you discuss, as we head towards the second half of the season, what are the deficiencies that they need to improve it? And do you think there's a good chance that those might be corrected for the Mystics to make a deep playoff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the second half of the season is going to be tough for them. I mean, if you look at the schedule, they still have 3 pairs of back-to-backs to play. Their August schedule is what I would describe as a nightmare with 14 games in 29 days. Like, that's crazy. And so I think that doesn't do them any favors. I also think, with any rookies contributing a bunch, you have to be wary of like a rookie wall that came straight from playing a full college season, basically into training camp, into the WNBA season. And then they were named All-Stars. And so they didn't actually get an All-Star break. And so I think managing their minutes and their workloads is going to be extremely important because, no disrespect to Brittney Sykes and Shakira Austin and all those guys, but I think really if the rookies are struggling, I think the Mystics as a whole are going to struggle. As far as specific areas, I think just continuing to figure out their offensive flow, cutting down on turnovers, those sorts of things are going to be huge. They tend to have some lulls early in games, and then they have these ferocious comebacks, which again, for a young team to be doing their best in the fourth quarter is kind of wild. You don't normally see that from young teams. Usually they, kind of peter out at the end of games sometimes. So I think for the Mystics, cleaning up kind of those early game lulls that they have sometimes will be huge so that they don't have to expend all that energy coming back in games, especially when you have games, back to back or so close together. So I think it's going to be a challenge for them. I think they can do it. Will they do it? It'll depend on, health and a lot of these adjustments we just talked about. So we'll see, but it should be an exciting playoff race for sure.
Should there be managed expectations in terms of how they perform in the playoffs, or do you think this detail, looking at the standings now, it's pretty close? Like, I don't think there's, a lot of separation between the top and the bottom teams and the standings. Do you think there's a chance of a miracle run, or do you think fans should just manage expectations? That is going to be happy if they're going to know it was like, whatever happens, happens. I get the hopes up.
I would probably say, like, I wouldn't count them out. I mean, they beat the Minnesota Lynx earlier this season. They've beaten the Seattle Storm. They've beaten the Atlanta Dream. So they've shown that they can win games against teams that most people think are better than them. But at the same time, I would probably say it's worth managing expectations just from the standpoint of, like, let's put things in perspective. This is a team that most people thought was going to be last or close to last in the entire league this season. So they are ahead of expectations right now. I think if they make the playoffs, folks should look at that as a bonus, like a gift. Like, getting these young players playoff experience would be invaluable for their development. Kind of however it goes, honestly, like as long as they, are playing hard and giving their best and kind of soaking it all in, I think that is a huge positive for them. If they manage to pull off an upset, like, fantastic. But I think even just getting into the playoffs would be huge for their development, even if they get swept out in the first round.
I always like delving into the fan bases of NBA teams, WNBA teams. What is the fan base like in Washington? Just their appetite for women's hoops overall, and how the Mystics fit into the rest of the culture of DC with other teams. And do you think it fluctuates based on the Mystics' success, or do you think that core fan base is always there? Right? I talked to just other reporters and also public address announcers where it's more tied to success at getting star players, and then others is usually the culture's already built in, so there's already a nice base. So I'm just curious where the Mystics fall in that in terms of just the fan base overall.
Yeah, so the Mystics have a group of fans called the Founding Fans who have been around since the team started, since the inaugural season in 1998. And they are what I would call a small but mighty group. I mean, if you endured the 1998 season, which was a terrible season by any standard, and you stuck around this long, like, you are a special fan. So, like, tip of the hat to you. So I think there is that kind of base of the Founding Fans, and there are longer term fans who are maybe not founding fans but have followed the team for a very long time. Many fans have been around since the 2019 WNBA finals, WNBA title. And that I was in the building for that game 5 win in 2019, and I legitimately wondered if the roof was going to fly off because it was so loud and electric in there. I was like, how do you keep this on? Like it was crazy. The place where the Mystics play used to be called Entertainment and Sports Arena. It's now Care First Arena. It's small and cozy, and so when it's like completely full, it's a crazy environment. The Mystics have been filling it up more this year than I think they did last year. Just in terms of how I interpret the crowd size. I haven't looked at actual attendance, which is sometimes those numbers are sometimes based on tickets sold and not people walking through the door anyway. But it seems fuller. It seems particularly engaged this year. It's gotten really, really loud for a lot of games. I think in part because the Mystics are so good at comebacks, like I said before, and it's hard not to get fired up when your team's like down 10 in the third quarter and then suddenly it's tied midway through the fourth, right? That's gonna kind of blow the roof off. So they've been highly engaged late in games, as the Mystics seem to always kind of make it close. And I think it helps, like the rookies seem to be a little bit of fan favorites too. Not to say that the older players are not, but I think there's been a fair amount of buzz around the rookies that have helped as well. So it's been a good environment for them so far. I think that will continue, assuming they stay in the push for a playoff spot. It seems to be going well as far as the fan base.
What other things of the W have stood out to you this season? Has anything surprised you entering this season? I know for myself, the Valkyries, just how they have been successful not only on the court, but also just their season ticket deposits and also just the attendance as well in that environment. I think that's been a surprise. What other things have caught your eye this season?
Yeah, I think, kind of going off your point, the fact that the Valkyries are making a push for the playoffs and the fact that, as of the All-Star break, the Mystics were essentially the closest teams that they were battling with for a playoff spot were the Las Vegas Aces and the Golden State Valkyries. Both of those are surprises for different reasons, right? The Aces, I think, were widely viewed as a lock to make the playoffs entering the season. They have had some struggles, even though they have a lot of experience and Olympian level players on that team. And then the Valkyries, expansion teams aren't generally very good, and they've definitely exceeded expectations. So I think that kind of three-way race a little bit, and in the second half it could, one team might surge and another team might fall back, and it might end up being a different trio jockeying for position at the end of the season. But I think the mix that we have right now is really interesting. I think the New York Liberty have been really interesting to watch, starting well and then really kind of struggling in the month of June with Jonquel Jones out for some, and then now they've signed Emma Mieseman, who Mystics fans know well from that 2019 championship. I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch, how she kind of fits in and as they reincorporate Jonquel Jones, and how good they can be with everyone. So I'll definitely be watching that. And then we haven't even hit the trade deadline yet, so I'm also curious, if anything happens there, Mystics related or not. I think just overall, kind of what you said about the Valkyries, like the buzz that they're getting, the attendance they're getting, like I feel like there's been a really great buzz around the league this whole season. And I'm excited to see how that plays out in the stretch run and in the playoffs.
Final question in this second half. What are some storylines that fans should be paying attention to that are being overlooked that, in your opinion, might be a factor when we head into the playoffs, or just some storylines that fans should be just on the lookout for that they may not be paying attention to, that might be overlooked by the national media, you think?
So for the Mystics specifically?
The Mystics and also the W both, if they can.
I think for the Mystics, it's going to be, again, like how the rookies hold up. I think that's something the national media is asking right now, but I think that's a big thing to watch. I think how Brittney Sykes plays the rest of the season after getting that first All-Star nod that she worked toward for so many years. I think that's going to be something that I'm watching. I'm also kind of looking at deeper down the bench, like how Sidney Johnson kind of settles into using his bench. Emily Engstler and Lucy Olson have seen inconsistent minutes throughout the season. Emily Engstler is a traditional four, not traditional because she shoots three, but she's a natural four. And they're also playing her a little bit at the three to kind of ease Citron's workload and find Engstler minutes. And can she settle into that spot at the three and really feel comfortable there? That's something that I'm going to look at because I think it kind of, it would be really good to get Engstler more minutes. I think she's very talented. It would also be very good to get Citron less minutes for reasons that we've talked about. So that's a big thing that I'll be looking at. And then Lucy Olson is a rookie, a second round pick who kind of has flown under the radar compared to the first round picks, which is only natural, right? But in times where the Mystics have really needed her without much guard depth, she has shown up more often than not, had some big scoring games. Tyler Byram, who writes for Monumental Sports Network, reported that Brittney Sykes has nicknamed Lucy Olson PPP, which stands for points per possession, because she just comes in and scores, which I think is awesome. So just seeing kind of, can they get more consistent minutes? Can they settle into their roles off the bench? Can they make this team even deeper and better? That's something that I'm going to be looking at. And then, across the league, I think you can look at every team and it kind of explodes with storylines. I think the Valkyries playoff push is definitely going to be on people's minds. I would love to kind of, learn more about what's going on in Las Vegas. Like where have the struggles been? How are they fixing them? Are they fixable? Where do they come from? Like all of these things around a franchise that kind of had been humming along and got a flat tire for a while this season. I'll be curious to see kind of how that goes. Yeah, and then of course the battle between Minnesota and New York for the top spot, and can Phoenix creep in? I think it's often talked about as like the big two of Minnesota and New York, but does Phoenix have something to say about that? We'll see.
Yeah, lots of great storylines as we head towards the big playoff push. Jenn, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Can you let our audience know where they can find you on social media, if any upcoming projects, or anything else you want our audience to be aware of?
Yeah, so you can find me on Blue Sky at jennhatfield.bsky.social. I'm also on Twitter at jennhatfield1, but I've shifted more to Blue Sky lately. You can find all my work at thenexthoops.com. And yeah, I'll just have a bunch of Mystics coverage for the second half of the season. Also some off-season Ivy League stuff for those of you who like that sort of thing. Also on the Next Hoops.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jenn. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you.